Well, hi there. Welcome to week 4 of the class. This is the week in which you will be preparing to take exam number 1 at the end of the week, as well as complete the project number 1, part 1. So the very first part of the project. And I wanted to make just a short little elaboration video here so that I could talk a little bit about one of the common sort of issues or challenges that a number of students have already contacted me about. And I just wanted to use my experiences talking with them to help you refine and ensure that your part 1 of project number 1 is what you want it to be and what it needs to be for the project. So the biggest issue that I have been confronted with talking with other students is just trying to clarify the problem. And I can say without question that every single student who had an issue with it, the problem had to do with how broad the initial research question was, and how after a small conversation I was able to help each of the students focus on something much more narrow. Because I have to tell you that for the sake of this small research design project, being narrow and being highly focused is the greatest path to success. So let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. I had a student or a number of students who came to me with a broad problem that went something like this. They said, I would like to investigate how social emotional learning might impact student behavior. So first of all, I appreciate the interest in social emotional learning and how that might translate into some sort of positive outcomes in the classroom. But when you talk about student behavior as the dependent variable, so in a problem like that, the social emotional learning or maybe perhaps the instruction or the training for it would be the independent variable. That's the variable that you plan to manipulate as a researcher or as a teacher. And student behavior would be the dependent variable, because that's the thing that you believe would depend on social emotional learning. Well, when I talk to students about what they mean by student behavior, because that's such a broad category, then I start to uncover some of the specific ways in which they personally would be interested in having something like the skills of social emotional learning having an impact on. And some of those specific skills include things like how well the students resolve conflict in the class in a constructive way, how well the students work in groups, so staying on task, being a good listener, those kinds of things, carrying out their assigned roles, how social emotional learning skill development might impact that. Following directions is an important behavior. On remaining on task when you're doing something important in class. Even test anxiety is an important variable that does have a positive impact on, at least it has an impact on student performance in the classroom. And you certainly could make connections between some type of social emotional learning training and how somebody feels about themselves, their level of confidence, and how that might translate into lower levels of test anxiety and more success for the students. And also just self-confidence in general might be impacted, like self-confidence in the classroom. So after speaking with the students in more detail, they were able to narrow their problem a bit, and so it ended up sounding something like, what is the impact of social emotional learning training on levels of test anxiety? So easy independent variable, social emotional learning training or skill level. Easy dependent variable, which is measuring test anxiety. So with that in mind, then the students will be able to go into part 2 and collect some really focused background research on, well, how do you measure test anxiety? What's a common way to do that? And what are some common ways to measure some important social emotional learning skills that might have an impact on that. And has anybody investigated this already? So that's the kind of thing that I'm really going to be looking for and providing feedback on when I review part one of the project. Again, I talked about the variables, and it's important to keep in mind that your problem statement should have a clear independent variable and a clear dependent variable. And if you don't understand that, exactly what I mean by that, then look to the course notes, because it really clarifies that. And the main thing really is just to keep it simple, just to try to really focus on a simple, clean design, because I'm asking you to do this project so that you can learn more about research design, about interventions, about research variables, even about something like research ethics, because designing studies, like once you get to that phase after part two, then it becomes really interesting when you consider some ethical questions about doing research with kids. For example, let's say that you strongly believe that, say, mindfulness can have a really positive impact on test anxiety. So I'm going to use a different independent variable now, mindfulness training. And you really believe that as a teacher, and you do some research online, you find other studies, and it shows, wow, kids really benefit, or people in general benefit from mindfulness when it comes to test anxiety, especially math test anxiety. And that can have a really positive impact on student performance in math and how they feel about themselves regarding math. Well, if you're going to design a study to find out whether or not mindfulness really does have an impact, or whether it might be something else, then perhaps your best research design is to design a study in which you have a control group where some students don't get the mindfulness training, and then you have a group of students who do, and they're equivalent groups, so that you can try to control for other variables that might impact test anxiety. So you design that, and it seems pretty simple and straightforward, but then you might ask yourself, wait a minute, I really believe in the independent variable, and yet I am consciously not providing that for a group of kids. So I am already operating on the assumption that some kids are not going to benefit in the classroom as much as others in order for me to pursue my research agenda. And are you okay with that? Are you ethically okay with that in an effort to sort of maximize external validity of your study? Are you okay making those kinds of controls? And I just love that. It's something that's really great to think about, because those are some of the really important things that researchers have to consider all the time. And so that's why you're designing this study, and those are the kinds of things that I want you to think about as you move forward in the design of your project. So good luck finishing up part one, and I look forward to reading part one of your papers. And again, I will be providing feedback over that, so that if you do have some trouble narrowing things down and you don't contact me sooner about this, then you'll still be getting some feedback from me. So I appreciate all the students who chose to reach out to me. And again, between now and the end of the week, if anybody else has some questions about their research problem, please don't hesitate to email me. I've been Zooming with a number of students, and I'm happy to meet with you however I can. So I just want you to really enjoy the project and be really thoughtful about it. So that's it.